Radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
All right. Good evening. How you doing? How you doing? All right. I'm good to go. I just sat down just like that. This is Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Today is Monday, December 16, 2024. We are kicking another week off here at Fade to Black. Let's do this, man. Very busy day around here. It's a very busy news cycle, all kinds of things going on. And you can help everything that we do around here at Fade to Black. We broadcast this show 4 nights a week. I do the news 4 afternoons a week. On Thursday, I do 3 shows. It's the news, and then I'm on with Christina Gomez, Mysteries with the History, and then Fade to Black on Thursday night. Sometimes I do shows on Friday. I'm doing production all weekend long. Help support everything that we do around here. Simple. Get a Fade to Black t-shirt. The links are below. 2 shirts, 2 ways to get them. Get a Game Changer. That membership, the links are below. Get a t-shirt. Get both t-shirts. All right. We have 2 different designs, and everything is autographed. Everything includes shipping. The links are below. All right. As mentioned, this is another week on Fade to Black, and kicking off things tonight, we have Joshua Cutchin with us and Ryan Grulich with us. They have a new film out. I believe it's premiering tomorrow, December 16th. It is called Lady of the Lake. We've got a little bit of everything here. We've got murder, we've got mystery, we've got hauntings, we've got the paranormal, we've got a mysterious lake, we've got a crazy town, everything, individuals, a long running mystery right there up at Lake Crescent, up in Port Angeles, Washington. We're going to be talking about all of that and much more tonight with Joshua and Ryan. Tomorrow night, Dr. Dan Biddle is with us. We're going to be talking about the Bible, specifically the Nephilim, giants of the Bible tomorrow night. Wednesday night, Joshua Shapiro is back with us. We're going to be talking about crystal skulls all night long. I have a large crystal skull collection. Every one of those crystal skulls has got a story behind it. That's what we're going to do on Wednesday night. And then Thursday is an AMA AJA. Ask me, ask Jimmy anything. We do this once a month, and it's going down this Thursday with everything that is going on in our community with drones and UAP and continued hearings and Capitol Hill, everything else. I'm sure that is going to be the subject of the show on Thursday night. Now, I texted out. I didn't text anything out today. And I didn't post it. My team posted a story that just came out, a report that just came out in the Philadelphia Inquirer. And that reached out, wanted some comments about the drones and what's going on. So, and then as it turns out, over the weekend, I got a bunch of media approaching me about this. So I can't say yes to everything, but I've said yes to maybe a half a dozen media outlets. So I am going to be doing that all week long and trying to get as much of it in by Thursday because I want the weekends to myself. But people want my comments and insights. So I'm going to give it to them. I say away from the media, even though I am the media. But that's what's going on in our community. Okay, so moving on. I have 4 major events coming up. I have 8 coming up. These are the next 4. the Conscious Life Expo, February 7th through the 10th, right here in Los Angeles, California, at the LAX Hilton. After that is Rise of the Guardians, March 29th and 30th, 2025 in Sedona, Arizona. After that, the Contact Modalities Expo, May 2nd, 3rd, and 4th in Delavan, Wisconsin at Delavan Lake. I don't know if it's as haunted as Lake Crescent, but I'll find out when I go to the Midwest. Then I'm going back to Peru for the Inca Celebration of the Sun. And this is June 17th through the 27th, 2025 with Brian Forrester. The links for all of my events and everything else are below. Okay, go get yourself some tickets and I'll see you out there in 2025. All right, tonight, got Joshua Cutchin back with us. We got Ryan Grulich with us tonight. Ryan wrote and directed the film. Joshua produced it. It is called Lady of the Lake. I have seen it. But what's more interesting about this, and these guys don't know it yet, even though we were just chatting, I've known about this case for a long time. So I'll talk about that in just a second. The documentary is excellent. Great editing, by the way. It's all framed up right. It's lit right. And it's really, really good. And it covers a very, very crazy case that took place starting back in 1937. So we're going to talk about all of that because this case, I just posted up in the chat. It's got everything, man. It does. This thing's got everything, including some really gruesome photographs. I just got to say it. We'll talk about that too as well. But it's chilling. The case is chilling. The events around it. All of the players in this very small town called Port Angeles. Everybody's interesting. It's an amazing story. Josh is a full-time author, and he says he's a musician. He just admires my guitars. And the other half of the team, Ryan, here's the thing. When it comes to filmmaking, and if you want to be a writer and you want to be a director, today, if you are doing this kind of stuff and people resonate with it, you don't need a giant movie production company to greenlight your film. No, you can start your own company and release it yourself. And that's exactly what he's doing with Creepy Kingdom. And he says he enjoys long walks on the beach. I am your host, Jimmy Church. And I would like to welcome for the first time to Fade to Black, Ryan Grulich. He's right there. Welcome back, Joshua Cutchin. Guys, hey, before we get started, and I just want to make sure you're both unmuted, Joshua. Okay, I've taken care of that. Before I get started, Ryan, this is your first time on the show, so you get the first time guest disclaimer. Joshua's been on before. He doesn't get it. He's get it again. He's probably jealous right now. But Ryan, it is you and I just sitting on my couch having a conversation as friends. And where the conversation starts, it starts. Where it ends. But we're as friends. You have to accept so the three of us can move on.
I accept.
Oh, man, that's perfect. That's perfect. Now, I'm going to start here. I have been to Port Angeles a few times.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And I am sure that I am the first radio host that has ever said that to you. And the only radio host that, or television or otherwise, that will say that to you, because Port Angeles is a very small port town. I think it's like the northwesternest town in the continental United States. I think that's what they're famous for, right? I think.
Yeah, well spotted. It's directly across the harbor from Canada, and so it's known for that. Yeah.
And so my first trip there, this is many years ago, probably early 90s. So I'm up there and I pull into town, not knowing really what to expect, but the plan was to take the ferry from there over to Victoria, which we eventually did. But we got there really early in the morning, and it's fogged in. So I can't see the water, right? It's all fogged in. And I come around, it's just this little village, right there. And I come around the corner and I see sticking out of the fog an aircraft carrier. Okay. And I was like, an aircraft carrier? Now, it turned out it was some old World War II aircraft carrier that they were scuttling and dismantling and cutting apart and all that. But it looked really cool in the fog. and so I go and I'm enjoying that. And I sit down at this coffee shop and I'm talking to the locals, and coffee shop / bookshop. Maybe you guys have been there. There's a couple of them right there in the water. Yeah. And then I see stuff about the Lady of the Lake. And that's when I first, and they laid the whole story in. Oh man, it's this, it's haunted, it's this, and murder mystery, 1930s. I was like, what? Really? So I followed up on that. I got some material, went home and did a deep dive into this crazy story. That's how I got connected to this 30 years ago, right? The movie is well done, but I have to start here. Where did the both of you, or did one of you latch onto the story first? How did that happen? Because this is not a paranormal story. It's not the Amityville horror, right? It's not out in front in this community. How did you guys hear about this?
Yeah, I'll take credit
Ryan.
for that.
Yeah. Okay. Ryan.
Yeah. So I was living in Seattle for many years. I'm talking to you from Orlando, Florida, but I'm a new resident here. I lived in Seattle for quite some time. And the story found me by knowing someone out there and taking a visit to Lake Crescent. I got introduced to the story, and similar to you, it was laid out in that, this is a story that's literally passed around generationally and eliminated, as it goes, and told around campfires and all this kind of stuff. And it really caught me and kind of hooked me. I did that same type of research, found that same tiny little booklet that you probably found in that same little coffee and bookshop. And then years later, making a film about it obviously was a whole other story, but that was how I found it.
Joshua.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So how did you hear about it through Ryan?
Through Ryan, yes. I can't remember exactly when it started happening, but I started getting this correspondence from this random weirdo in my inbox, my email inbox, and over the course of several months, we started having some phone conversations. I believe it, if memory serves, it coincided with 2020 and all that madness.
Mm-hmm.
So we all had a little bit of extra time on our hands, and we would chat for an hour and a half at a time, just bouncing ideas off of each other. And you talk to people who have dreams and visions for projects and things like documentaries, and I've talked to a lot of people who do them and they don't always get to follow through for whatever reason. But Ryan was able to pull together the resources and has the professionalism to actually pull it off. And it's been an honor and an ever growing friendship between us to sort of bounce ideas off each other. And that was a lot of the capacity that I was involved in.
Ryan, this film, this story, the film and the story has it all. I mean, the story, it's just like, what isn't included here? What can we take off the table? Because everything is there, isn't it?
Short Men in Black. This
right.
This has really brought me to a place in the end that would be germane to this audience as like what Keel would call a window area. And if you start there and then reverse engineer the story, yes, it has a lot going on for sure. But no Men in Black. Nobody came and shook me down.
Well, not yet. But you've got it still may be an unsolved murder. I'm not convinced that. We'll save that for later. All right. Monty. Monty. What the name is just implies guilt,
doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Okay, so anyway, I'm not so sure that this thing is solved.
Really?
Right? I'm not convinced of that at all. But anyway, so we have murder, we have violence, we have a creepy town. We have the cast of characters. Monty's mom, right? She should have gone to jail too. If anyway, but the paranormal, the body, the evidence, the investigation that went into this, and then of course the hauntings and the ghost sightings and everything else that followed after. Everything is in this story. It's absolutely incredible.
And I tend to think that you're not wrong. And I tend to think that there's probably a story that in some ways you would say is similar all over the place, right? I mean, this to me is a very archetypal situation in which a community responds to violence, right? And it responds to it in different ways over different eras, but nonetheless, like you're talking at that root concept of where trauma influences our experience with things. And I do think that there's a lot of ladies of the lake. We know there are, right? Like we can trace that back to Arthurian legend.
You can.
And so from there, like these sorts of things grow out. But yeah, this story took shape due to a very strange happening in which Lake Crescent, which is rumored to never give up its dead, like it's not just a colloquialism, it very rarely yields a body under search, and is also purported to be bottomless, and we can talk about that. But this lake gives up a body, and when the body comes up, two fishermen identify the body, bring the body back, and see that it's got a very strange makeup. The body itself, the remains are almost soap-like and hard, and so they haven't seen a condition like this before. And it turns out that the body was saponified due to the freezing cold temperatures in the water. It sits above freezing all year, but it's just above freezing. And so for the chemical reaction that took place in the water, this body came up saponified, and then a great mystery ensues to try to resolve who the lady of the lake, the soap woman that they found was. And back in the late 30s, we didn't have the type of detective stuff that we have.
We didn't have any of that. No,
right.
Certainly no internet or armchair sleuths or CSI Miami. We didn't have any of that stuff. But to talk about the condition of the body, and then I brought up 2 points. I said the story has everything, and so does the film. So I'm gonna get to the film in just a second. I think it's very important to point out. But anyway, the fat, everybody, fat, bacon fat, animal fat, human fat. You take that tissue and you subject it to freezing cold temperatures and the moistness of water over a period of years, it turns into something rather grotesque with the texture of soap.
Yeah,
that's what and you look at the pictures and you hear the descriptions and you read the descriptions, including the press clippings. It's horrifying. The pictures are horrifying.
In many places, you'll find that graves are actually, and especially so now I live in Florida, which is a very like swampy area, right? In a lot of places, you'll find that graves have the actual bodies up higher, right, over the water table, because it's not just, it doesn't have to just be the cold water. However, that does, help it along. This happens quite frequently in places like that are low-lying, sort of like under the water table, so New Orleans, swampy kind of places, right?
All throughout the Caribbean, yeah.
Correct, yeah. And so it isn't terribly uncommon to see this. However, right, like for us in the West and especially in the Northern Hemisphere during the 30s, this was completely atypical. You didn't have the sort of internet, telling you this kind of stuff, like what is happening. So I think it really does start off with that great mystery of her remains and what is going on. So it begins with a bottomless lake yielding a body that has undergone this crazy transformation that nobody can quite identify. And that's where the story really starts.
Yeah. Plus the geography, and anybody can go look up Lake Crescent and try to find out information. Nobody really knows the hard facts about that lake. And that's that's a pretty interesting twist on that. Its depth and so forth have left the lake largely a mystery when it comes to that kind of stuff. Anyway,
bottomless lakes are bottomless lakes are their whole own place that we could stop and talk. And this is when you talk about Cutchin and I bonding. This is one of those places that I called him and was like, tell me about bottomless lakes, because LiDAR scans have revealed a close to a potential bottom of Lake Crescent at around 700 feet, but it is not the bottom. So in essence, technically, Lake Crescent remains bottomless till today.
Isn't that crazy? Isn't
and
that?
Wild.
Yeah, it's real wild. And
This
there's
is-
one other. I'm sorry, Joshua.
It's okay.
One other interesting point about this is the movie Poltergeist. No, I kid. No, I'm not kidding. Actually, because there was a construction project that was halted out there because they started to find they were building a dam. They started to find human remains, right? So they stopped the construction project and they find an Indian burial site with 300 bodies. And a lot of the bodies were entire families grouped together. Right. So they halted the dam project, and it was eventually canceled.
Yeah, and I don't want to speak for the indigenous population there, but what I do know from their stories would be that the Lake Crescent and the lake that's adjacent to it, these huge lakes were one lake at one point. And they say that Storm King, which is the name of a mountain there now, was a god that took these two warring tribes who were fighting around this lake and actually threw down the mountain and split the lake into two, and that it caused a great deal of death. And so, whether there's any relevance, to that story and to all of this stuff, who knows? I don't. I can't speak to that.
Okay, I will speak to that. There were at least 5 major rock avalanches in that area over the last couple of million years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that we know. And it's a glacier lake. It's carved by glacier.
It's a glacier lake. Yeah, so there may be something to the indigenous. Whenever there's a story like that, where there's smoke, there's fire.
Agreed.
There's always an origin part to this. And then you add that to this lake, which by all accounts, really, it's pretty beautiful.
Stunning.
It's mysterious. Yeah, it's stunning. It's stunning, but it's mysterious. And her body's not the only one that's been found there, by the way. There's been many. So that sets the tone for the story. Now let's go to the film. Excuse me. The film is stunning. So how do you approach that, Ryan? How concerned are you with cinematography, framing, and editing, or do you leave that to the editors? And do you and who shot the film? Did you shoot it, or did you have a director of photography?
So first of all, filmmaking is a village and it's a team sport, right? So I was super blessed and am super blessed to have a crew of people that I work super closely with and have on multiple projects. The director of photography on that film is a gentleman named Asher Vast. The editor is a gal named Frances Baker, who happens to be my partner, who's in the other room right now. But yeah, and so we're really lucky to have all this. As far as concern over things, I'm pretty compulsive. And I tend to, I'm the annoying director behind the camera telling the DP what I want, but I trust him to get it. But I'm also the annoying director in the edit room. And so everybody that I work with is like putting up with me, but also super talented on their own. So it's this really cool group of people. And then I have a lot of great thought leaders and people around me like Josh and others who, when I'm going into these types of topics that are quite frankly above my pay grade in a lot of places from a research perspective, I can lean on them to get smarter. And so that's really how this film came around.
Films are editing can make or break a film.
100%. So, we spent 2 years editing.
It's 200%. It's not 100%. It's 200%.
Yeah, we spent 2 years editing that film.
I'm going to give you advice that you already know. Don't let Frances go. You keep that card close to your chest, my man.
She's listening to you in the other room, I think.
Yeah. She's like, yeah. No, because it's important these days, and it's always important. But there's a lot of talented people out there, and there's lots of ways to get your stuff done. And really, really, really good work is surfacing. So, and people have a choice, but that's one thing. But people also now they're getting accustomed to really good editing, really good effects, really good this, really good titling, really good, cameras are cheap, software. And so you have to raise your game because somebody else is going to definitely come out with something that is just as good. Joshua, you know exactly what I'm talking about, don't you?
Yeah, I do. And I was just thinking about this. It's the collapse of gatekeepers over the past 20 or so years in certain fields like publishing and like filmmaking has been sort of a double-edged sword, because it has, in a very important and invaluable way, really democratized the sort of media that get to people. But at the same time, if you decide to do this on your own, or sort of with a mom and pop approach, or without sort of basically the backing of a giant production company, you don't necessarily always have the resources to support you on an endeavor like this. So you have to sort of become a jack of all trades and really rely on networks of people who can really help put something like this together. And I I knew I would get along with Ryan well, but it wasn't until the finished product started coming together that I was like, oh yeah, I really am quite proud to be associated with this, for sure.
Now, a couple of other things, and I want to talk about Amanda for a second, if I can bring her in. The town of Port Angeles is today around 20,000 people.
Sounds right.
Okay. Yeah, it's tiny. It's this big, right? It's that big. In 1937, when Amanda disappeared, there you go. When Hallie disappeared, Amanda, if you're listening, that was strange that came out that way. Yeah. When Hallie disappeared, population between 8,000 and 9,000. That's it. Everybody knew everybody in that town, and yeah, is that surprising, or just because you're a cute little seaside village doesn't mean that you're immune to the crazy? What do you think about that, Ryan?
No, I mean, I think there's no, you're not immune to it. I mean, if you, again, looking at this story, like the way it unfolds, this is something that you can look around in your own life and see examples of that maybe didn't go as far, but like this situation could happen to anybody. And I think that's actually, I'm not super into true crime, but when I followed this story, like as a parent to an 18-year-old daughter, as a man who's, cares about women, it was a terrifying story for me just because of that, because it was so like banal almost, right? And the way that people just kind of wrote it off, like, oh, she just disappeared for a while or whatever, like it can happen anywhere. And I think it is happening everywhere.
So Joshua, when you hear about a case like this, which sounds like a Los Angeles case, it sounds like a New York City case, right? But it's not. It's in a town of 8,000 people in a remote part of the United States, where, if that is the case, everybody in that town knows everybody's business. Everybody.
True.
Everybody knows what house you live in, your family, your children, where you go to see. They know it. They know where you were. Everybody knows everything about everybody. Hallie disappears. Everybody knows who did it, right? Probably. This is not, and it just kind of, she disappeared. She, what was the story? Hold on, I don't want to get ahead of myself, and I want everybody to watch the movie.
You know it.
but okay, the story started, and if you guys want to expand on that, we can. That she's got a new man and she's moving to Alaska, and
Correct.
the town just blows it off, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of crazy, isn't it? When everybody in that town knows everybody. Who's the new boyfriend? Who's what?
It is important to remember that these were different times, and Port Angeles was a little bit rougher than it is today too, as well. I mean, you had people moving in and out of there as well, so that probably contributed to this to a certain degree.
It was a town based on prostitution, drugs, and alcohol.
Right.
Logging.
I mean, basically speaking, yeah. Well, yeah. I meant to say it was based on logging.
Yeah. But yeah, no, Josh is right. It was way more transient back then, and history is slippery. And the further back you go in this stuff, the harder it is to understand some of the things that happened because they're just so out of the norm for us. But yeah, I mean, you could see her as somebody who had got married 1, 2, 3 times, and then in Seattle moves out to Port Angeles, to get married out there again. And just looking at this situation of like, how does she go away? Well, she's gone away before. What's really interesting to me about that is that you see, Monty's family in all of the press clippings and really hovering around the story. You never see her family, and she's got a sister, at least one sister that was in town that she had lived with. You just don't see the support for her rising up the way the other support did for her partner. But I think that when the body was discovered, nobody knew who this was, right? So just to go back to that, like there's this whole mystery that the only reason it got solved was because of a simple mistake that she had made. And once her body was identified, then all signs were pointing towards what happened to her.
Right. Now, let's back up for a second. I want to mention really quick, the film releases tomorrow.
Yes.
Yeah, December 17th. I want everybody to know, you know where to go for all of your streaming stuff. And tomorrow it is not The Lady of the Lake. It is Lady of the Lake. Okay. Now, strange twist, but I'm going to bring this up. You guys ever watch the comedy series Brooklyn Nine-Nine?
No.
I haven't either.
Okay. All right. It's a comedy. It's good.
I mean, I'm familiar with it, but I've never
yeah,
watched
it's really good. Just start with season 1. There's 5, 6 seasons. Watch them all back to back. Great writing, great stuff. But there's an episode. Okay, it's a precinct in Brooklyn, where kids, 3rd graders, are brought in for a field trip. Right. And so they're sitting there. And this is in your film, by the way.
I know where you're going.
Bringing it. Yeah. So they bring in the kids. And the kids are sitting there. And Gina gets up and goes, okay, do you guys want to see some crime scene photos of dead bodies? And they're like, yeah. And she goes to the morning, gets a pair of hands, right? Freaks out the class. And the teacher comes in and goes, you did what? And the class was so happy, and it was the best field trip ever. Anyway, this scene in your movie of the archival footage of the description of how those dental records were gotten is one of the craziest things I have ever seen on film. Yeah. Number 1. Number 2, it was how it was described.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm a grown ass man. I was sitting there going, what?
Yeah.
What?
It's a moment for sure.
It's
yeah.
a moment, man, in front of children.
I'm out there nosing around the archives in that town. Everybody's super great, very helpful. I end up getting a couple of VHS tapes in the mail from a teacher at the elementary school or junior high school there. I've forgotten his name, but anyway, very kind, sends these tapes to me. I watched them. So at some point, they have a tape of a gentleman named Harlan McNutt. Harlan McNutt becomes like the living legacy for this. He becomes a spokesman essentially for this case.
Harlan's the man for sure.
Yeah, he kept it alive. He was also he was a medical student that was at home when the body was discovered in 1940 for vacation, mind you, not a credentialed, doctor or anything, just a medical student still. And he gets asked to come out and evaluate the body because there was not a medical examiner in Port Angeles or Clallam County, I believe at that time. They had to bring somebody out from Seattle, King County, which is a good hour and a half away as the crow flies. Probably longer back then because the roads weren't as sophisticated. So anyway, he ends up, taking care of the first evaluation of the body. Now, he he becomes a spokesperson for this case and keeps talking about it in minor press and stuff locally for a long time. But what happens is towards the end of his life, he ends up coming into these middle schools and telling this story almost annually for Halloween, right? And so as we get to the part where, Josh and I really click on some of these stranger things, what we have is this gentleman who is coming in and really just propagating and eliminating and elaborating and embellishing this story of this woman who was murdered out at Lake Crescent, which is in all of these kids' backyards. And these are 12 to 15-year-old children that are being passed around, these images of Hallie's saponified remains, and being told the detailed, descriptions of that first encounter, in which, for instance, her jaw gets ripped off. She doesn't have, pieces of her face are missing, and the children are aghast. You're aghast as a human watching this. And so when I saw the footage, I just thought, wow,
that's gold. That's cinema gold.
I mean,
cinema gold.
Yeah, it's cinematic. Okay, but at the same time, what are these kids dealing with? So that we address that in the story.
Did you see the little girl with the long hair?
But
the teacher, as she's walking by and is talking to the class, today, if you did any of that, you go to jail.
Go to
jail.
And he even says, it's spooky, but hey, it's Halloween. Right?
When he says that, Joshua, I don't want Ryan and I are rudely interrupting you.
Oh, that's all right.
But when he goes, I look, this isn't a spoiler, everybody. This is what you need to see the film for this, and I'm paraphrasing. You need to see the film for the story, but this one little nugget. So Harlan goes, you have to understand, there was no skin on the skull. It was just no face and no eyes. He goes, but you know what? It's Halloween. That's exactly what he says to the class. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah, it was
what I love about that scene, though, is it's such a concise demonstration of how this story has just permeated the very fabric of the culture and the community in this area. And, we had addressed sort of earlier how Ladies of the Lake are this archetypal figure that sort of echoes across time and culture. But so it becomes sort of a chicken and the egg sort of question. You have this ancient archetype of the Lady of the Lake, but you have this real story that's feeding into it, that's taking root in this fertile ground of this area, and is, in turn feeding into actual sightings and the lore that's built around it. And that really is the level that I have resonated with the most with Ryan on, is sort of discussing the sort of archetypal character of this and how the genuine aspects of what happened in this case seem to also take on this mythological status. And it's this interplay between this sort of quasi-mythological story and these actual tropes as well. We were talking about Lake Crescent earlier, and the fact that it's bottomless and doesn't give up its dead. It's really interesting. There's a wonderful book that I don't know why no one has republished it, because it's like it's my favorite lake monster book ever. And it's by a gentleman named Michel Mergier, called Lake Monster Traditions. It's out of print. You can still pick up copies of it on Amazon. But he sort of goes through various lake monster traditions all over the world, but he was French Canadian, so he devotes a lot of time to Canada. But he noticed trends worldwide of lake monster lakes, and they tended to be, legendarily bottomless and to not give up their dead. Sometimes have, alleged entry points to subterranean caverns underneath their depths. And so it really does seem like all the pieces were in place for this particular tragedy to sort of become larger than life in the way that it does. And once you progress into people having, firsthand experiences of the strangeness around this case and around the lake, then it almost takes on a life of its own. It's almost like it gets egregorized or something. And that's,
well, it does.
Yeah.
It almost gets turned into Camelot in a weird way. And you brought up Arthurian legends earlier, because a lake of that depth, and the way that the body, well, anyway, this body wanted to be found. And we all know the story of Excalibur, right? And the Lady of the Lake, and the hand comes up,
yeah.
right. And that's how she was found.
Correct. That is the one thing that we skipped over. When those two fishermen found her, her right arm was extended with her hand sticking up out of the water. And quite frankly, it was also said that the skin had been, missing around the edges of her fingers. So it was bone protruding. And the symbolism is completely unmistakable. And these were the elements that drew me. They say if you want to, write well, read well, and I've read a lot, and it doesn't make me a good writer, but I've read a lot. And I knew right when I heard this, I was like, are you kidding? Like,
it's almost made up. It almost sounds too good.
It definitely sounded bizarre. And so I think that to Josh's point, when I initially reached out to him, it was definitely to explore these bottomless lakes, all this other stuff. But what we started to find as we inched out into there was a deeper level of weirdness that, followed the case and the experiences people were having in the more modern day setting. And so it basically never stops following this linear trajectory of the most absurdly generic, almost is the term I would use, like canonized sorts of experiences that you would have. It just follows that trajectory all the way into the present day with a variety of different experiences. It's wild.
How did you find the banker? Amanda.
I feel like, how does anybody find anything, right? But like,
Right.
I wanted to work with somebody on this project who had a very honest. Okay, let me just break this down further for you. I have never watched an episode of Ghost Hunters. I don't know what those shows do. I don't know what that whole field is about. I don't know any of it. So I wanted to work with somebody that had a very high level of integrity. I wanted to work with somebody who had a good scientific sort of acumen and was super sharp and intelligent and could approach this from a way that was meaningful instead of a way that was kind of cheeseball. I will also say that my intuition, because I do understand other things that are probably adjacent to the ghost hunting world, but I don't study that. But my intuition was that there was going to be some sort of adventure that was bigger than ghost hunting here. I could just, the hand, right? I could feel it. And so I knew that somebody who had a more rigorous approach to it would either bring a level of sanity to where I would probably take us on some sort of weird Lynchian Black Lodge sort of journey out there, or she herself would be confronted and challenged by the sorts of things that I was seeing. So when I set out to find somebody, Amanda sort of emerged pretty quickly, and we clicked, and she is exactly what I just said. She's incredibly smart. She's intuitive. She knows her stuff. She doesn't fabricate anything. All the things that I was looking for in somebody, she brought to the table immediately. And she set out and really, I think, took a deeper approach to Hallie's story based on what she's told me and what we talk about in the film than she had with or any other case. And she said, sort of on par, like a lot of people hunting ghosts aren't really taking the time to like drill in and like learn all these details about, the case and the story and the region and, the other things that are adjacent to what's happening in there. So she really exercised her time on this to learn about all of those facets, including what potential ley lines might be running through there, as well as what the historical components of the indigenous, people were, and the dynamics of this case. So she really went right along with me, learning a lot of this stuff. We spent a lot of time talking back and forth. And so when she went out to investigate the paranormal stuff here, she really had a pretty profound understanding of what it was. And so I just want to say that, when you look at Amanda on that, yeah, she's got a ton of research into it. And that was why I picked her, because I kind of felt like she was going to go down that road.
Hey, she's a good dynamic on camera too, as well. She knows how to tell the story, and she knows how to weave it. Joshua, when you have talent like that, with Pamela and everybody else, by the way, I know a few of the people that are in the film, but a documentary. But I like learning stuff. And it seems that, and Joshua, today, when it comes to true crime and the paranormal, what is new? What is new? I mean,
Right.
how many cases can be talked about or spoken? How many Netflix 3-part documentaries can be made?
Well, I think what the documentary does really well, and this is sort of the direction that I would like to see all things paranormal going in, is addressing the breadth and depth that these particular topics can encompass, even when you get sort of granular, as in like one specific case. If you start to take sort of a 10,000 foot view of this thing, whatever it is, right? This thing that we're all here talking about and interested in, you start to see connections to all sorts of other different things that we have historically really sort of cordoned off into their own domains. We'll keep the ghosts over here. We'll keep the UFOs over here. We'll keep the archetypes and the myth making over here. And that's something that I am especially fond of in this documentary, is that point about, I don't know, a little bit over halfway through, probably about two-thirds of the way through, where you sit back and you go, wait, what the heck am I watching? Why are we talking about some of these other things? I thought this was a straightforward whodunit.
Ryan brought up John Keel earlier. I think he quoted him. And John Keel started off in one direction. And by the time he was starting to wrap things up, he's like, man, you know what, man? I think we're just talking about the same thing here. It's all connected.
Yeah,
and I think that's what comes out of it. Have you guys seen, I just want to mention this really quick, because I'm a big fan of true crime. I like the documentaries. I listen to the podcast. And I think that to both of your points, when it comes to the paranormal and even the supernatural, which are two different things, but they're related and connected, if you just stick to the facts, you've got amazing stuff. You don't have to mention the ghost that went through the wall. You don't have to go there. It's everything else that is around it. And it's the same thing in this case with Hallie. You got everything there. You don't even need to go wacko. You don't need to go woo-woo. This has it all. There is a documentary series out right now. It's called Kings of Tulsa.
I've heard of this. I haven't seen it yet, but I've heard of it. I heard it.
Okay. This is about, do you remember when Ricin was sent to Obama at the White House, right? And Ricin was being sent white powder in envelopes, around the country. That's what this is about, right? Okay. You never heard about that case after. You never really found out who made it or where it came from. You know who it was? Elvis impersonators in Tulsa and Tupelo, Mississippi. Kings of Tupelo. Yeah. And just go, like I said, just when you think every 3-part true crime documentary has been made, you find something like this, or like Hallie, where this is a case that if you just stick to the facts, it is fascinating. Right. And just like this Kings of Tupelo, where just stick to the facts. The facts are Elvis impersonators, Ricin in the mail to the Oval Office. It's like, you got to be kidding me, man. I'll direct that documentary.
Yeah, you would get kicked out of the writer's room for writing.
You
something
would.
That
You
bonkers.
would.
Yeah.
Well, just like okay, so with this, let's get just to some facts here that set up everything. Hallie disappeared in 1937.
December 21st, 1937, the winter solstice.
It's the holidays. She doesn't show up to work, and her hand didn't rise to the surface until almost 4 years later.
Yeah, July of 1940.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah. I mean, for me personally, in my worldview, her disappearing and being murdered on the winter solstice, December 21st, 1937, is also a very significant thing. And also, I'm a huge Disney fan, which unrelated, but sort of a weird sync. On December 21st, 1937, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs premiered at the Carthay Circle Theater in San Francisco, thus launching the entire trajectory of Walt Disney. But, so this same night you have this happening, right? Just to give you a sense of where you're at in history. And the charge, of that, right? Like, think about the sort of world we were living in. And then in 1940, when her body was discovered, obviously we were entering World War, right? Like we were in a very chaotic, traumatic state as a planet, even. And this case legitimately competed for headlines with the World War. Like, it literally did. And you talked about it being an LA case. Well, it sort of was an LA case. It got a lot of coverage in LA because, of her husband taking off, to down there, and he was from down there. And so there was a lot of coverage, and there even ended up being a film made by Robert Montgomery that was very not having anything to do with this, but just sort of borrowed the name. And so, yeah, the time there in those 3 years, from the time she was murdered until the time she was discovered, it was a world transformed. And when she came out, it was a time that was pretty chaotic, and probably makes for more strange things to emerge too.
Now, then we have some of let's get into the pop culture stuff. We've got a couple of, I think every house on that lake and every inn and restaurant is probably haunted. Certainly looks haunted to me. But you've got that. You've got ghost sightings. You've got that type of folklore that surrounds Lake Crescent as well.
Yeah, the Hoh Rainforest, which is adjacent to Lake Crescent, is actually the #1 place per capita for Bigfoot sightings on the planet. In between the two mountain ranges there, the Cascade and the Olympics, you've got Kenneth Arnold first sighting the UFOs over Mount Rainier. You've still got a lot of UFO sightings going on out there today. Anybody who's a deep diver on really weird stuff will remember an FBI guy named Ted Gunderson who went on Geraldo Rivera and made predictions about satanic ritual murders all over the country, some of them turning out to be right. Now, I didn't include this in the film, but he actually predicted that there would be bodies buried, that there was satanic ritual murder taking place really not far away from this lake. Israel Keys, as we cover in the film, serial killer Israel Keys stated plainly that he put at least one body in that lake and knew all the details about its depths and its temperature. This whole area is, quite frankly, just bananas. Like, it's a window area. It's a bananas place. When I reached out to Josh too, and I'd love for you to talk about it, if you remember, I said, there's like fairies out here. There's brownies. There's people talking about seeing brownies. There's women in white. There's orbs. There's, these ghost hauntings. There's ritual satanic murder on Geraldo Rivera. Please help me make some sense of this and tell me there's a historical context. And do you remember looking into that and going down that road with me?
I remember a bit of that.
Yeah.
I'm always, whenever you talk about this sort of density of anomalies in one area, it reminds me of that quote from the novel Goldfinger that's once is happenstance, twice is coincidence, and 3 times is enemy action. But regarding this, was this about the water babies? Was that what I looked into? Yeah. So there, you'll find sort of variations on this all the way down through South America as well. But there are some tribes in this region that do talk about these sort of water babies that are these fairy-like creatures that dwell in some bodies of water that call out to you and sort of sound like a child in the forest, and you go and you try to help them and they end up pulling you under. And of course that, speaking of John Keel, was one of the things that he noticed in a lot of cases that you still hear in Bigfoot cases and other sort of just high strangeness cases today are the sounds of infants in the forest, mystery infants crying. So yeah, it's just, it's the concentration of high strangeness in this area that sort of does lead you down the garden path to wondering how connected could these things possibly be? I mean, I know in my backyard, I think everywhere has its own share of anomalies, but it's nowhere near the density that you see in a place like, this particular sliver of America.
And with the water babies, speak to it just really quickly. The
water babies. I wanted to say this really quick. John, one of our moderators, old friend of mine, and who I know quite well, just popped up in the chat. I live in Washington State. Quit trying to sell me on it.
Hey,
right?
I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know if you need to be sold on it. Like if you knew all this, most people would move away. But with the water babies, right? Like the reason that connective tissue was there was because people have made claims, and we talk about this in the film, of what they think is Hallie at the water crying, and when they get down there, there's nothing there.
Mhm.
And so it's sort of that same sort of lore that's just, it's so like crazy. Yeah.
It also reminds you of the La Llorona stories that you
Mhm.
find all throughout Latin America, of a woman in white, usually by a body of water, weeping. So it's almost as if the story of this particular tragedy served as fuel or kindling for whatever archetypal layer we're dealing with, and that I find that so fascinating. And in that sense, I think this is truly, a Fortean documentary. It's not just, I wouldn't just say that it's supernatural or true crime or paranormal. I think that it really does get into those like sort of mind-bending, topsy-turvy, what is reality kind of things if you entertain it in the right way.
Yeah, I've experienced so much craziness in Washington, and I don't know why that is. I have said quite publicly that we share the same night sky with Washington as we do anywhere else. It's the same. Why do we see stuff in Washington skies like we do when this, just you head over in another direction where they're not being seen? I'm talking about high up in the sky. You should be able to see it everywhere. It's the same thing. The forest in Washington, you just mentioned Mount Rainier, right? And you think about Kenneth Arnold, and then you go and the Bigfoot sightings in the Columbia River. You have that, but then you have Cooper and him jumping out of an airplane, right? I mean, it's just like Washington State has got its share of craziness, and
It does.
and Soundgarden wrote those songs for a reason,
Yeah.
if you really think about it, because there's so much to experience. And then I'll throw in one other key part you guys haven't mentioned: vampires.
Yeah.
Right.
They sparkle.
Yeah.
Well, the other component that we haven't mentioned is serial killers. And that's one of the other exports that, Washington has a lot of credibility for. Sad.
Is that the rain or the heroin?
Well, heroin usually puts you to sleep. Last I heard, I'm just saying for a friend. I don't know, but like this whole deal of the serial killers. I do think that the weather has something to do with it. I did live there for, like I said, almost 20 years, sort of at the base of Mount Rainier, and spent a lot of time, out there in those spaces. And I don't have any answers for you, but what I do think is that it's a place that's very strange.
Sure.
And it's remote. People don't understand how remote it is. Do you know? Okay, I'll tell you something crazy before the break. Did you know that the United States Air Force had a troop transport plane that flew over Mount Rainier, crashed on an ice glacier, and was not found for years?
I believe it.
Now go look up that case and go look up how it was just miles from Tacoma, man.
Yeah, I believe it.
And they didn't search for anything. They just that's what goes down up there, and there's no reason to send a search party.
They let the remote viewers do it.
Yeah. And that's Washington, and somebody just said, what do you mean vampires in Washington? Haven't you ever seen the TV show Twilight? It's a documentary.
It's definitely a doc. When we come back, maybe you could talk about the missing 411 and adjacent cases too.
Well, that too as well. Let's take our break right here. Our guest tonight, Ryan Grulich, is with us, and back with us, Joshua Cutchin. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. This is Fade to Black. Stay with us. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to get your alerts and access to over 2,000 videos. Click that subscribe button right now. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and get the Fade to Black official podcast. 2,000 episodes, all of them commercial free for just $2 a month. Watch Into the Vortex on Gaia TV. It's Fade to Black for the screen. Simple to do. Go to Gaia.com, search Jimmy Church, or click on the link below. Follow Fade to Black on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Get all of the show updates every single day. It's now called X, but who cares? How you doing? Jimmy Church here. Special announcement. Get your Fade to Black t-shirts. That's right. Help support the show. Help support everything that we do over here. We've got 2 t-shirts. We've got 2 ways to get them. Get your Fade to Black t-shirt today. Go Beckley Teppy. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and become a Fadernaut. Get a membership. That's right. Everything is commercial free. You have access to downloads, and you get to call yourself a Fadernaut. River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Truly the best coffee on planet Earth. Just visit rivermoonwellness.com or their Amazon store. It's all simple to do. You can check out the Fade to Black blend, the Game Changer blend, or any of their Black Moon Wellness products. It's the only coffee I drink. It is the best, and it's Doc. Again, rivermoonwellness.com. All right. Welcome back, Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Ryan Grulich is with us, directed and wrote the new film, Lady of the Lake. There is no the. And Joshua Cutchin, producer, is back with us too as well. The film is excellent. And I wanted to, why the fascination with everyone with documentaries. I love documentaries, and we were talking about Antarctica earlier, and there is Werner Herzog, right? He's like the best. He's the best. And his documentary about meteorites in Antarctica is one of the greatest documentaries all of his stuff is great, but you watch that, and it's like, how can you make little black rocks on the ice a fascinating story, right?
Well, I think he could probably make the phone book a fascinating story, but yes, I take your meaning. I mean, I've found myself gravitating more towards this sort of audiovisual sphere, and hopefully we can talk about some of Ryan and my future plans later. But I think that there is, I'm obviously a big fan of books, having written plenty of them, and they're great for that sort of deep dive. But I think that there are some things that you can achieve through this other medium that you're very hard pressed to do through a book. Yes, in a book you have sort of an endless amount of time to discuss and dissect things, but there's an emotional level that can be reached. You can, a picture is worth 1,000 words, so you don't have to sit there and describe something. You can just show it, and you can really one of the great things about Lady of the Lake is the dramatizations that are in it. I think they really do sort of draw you into Hallie's story over the course of the entire running time.
Ryan?
Yeah. Why documentaries? Real life's pretty wild. And I think looking at things actually happening or that have happened, through the lens of curiosity is something that we like to do, and we like to have conversations about politics and art and theology and outer space and the origins of life, and what this girl's hair looks like over there, and all of this kind of stuff. And so I think you're seeing a shift towards unscripted and reality television and documentaries, largely because we are pretty interesting, and all the stuff that's going on around us is super interesting too. So, I mean, I don't mean to be reductive, but for me, that's really what it is. I find humans fascinating. I find their stories fascinating. I find the places that we live and the things that happen on them to be super interesting too.
I like scripted stuff.
Me too.
I like to be, I do. I like to be taken away. I like the theater of the mind. I like to be entertained for sure. But I like nonfiction books.
Yeah.
I like books on
nonfiction.
yeah, that's even better. Yeah, it's called physics. But and it's the same thing with documentaries, and it's a welcoming thing that so much of the world has kind of shifted away. I'm not saying that episodic comedy, network television is ever going to go away. No, I'm not suggesting that at all. There's a reason why Marvel Studios is so big and so successful, even though those are kind of documentaries too, in a weird way. But the appreciation that is out there now, not necessarily for reality TV, but for true crime, real life scenarios, is something that is exploding, and it just seems like it's a growth market. And I'm really, really glad that people want to exercise their intelligence and go and examine these kinds of subjects, like Lady of the Lake, where I'm not sure that this film gets made 20 years ago.
Maybe not, but again, like, I guess just to say with regard to storytelling and how it can intersect there, like, I fell into documentary filmmaking. I was a musician before I was a father. And then when I became a faja, I took over, recording and engineering and all this, and producing live events and all this stuff. And I always wanted to make horror films, and I still do. And I do make horror films with my friends. They're not any good, but we're still working on it, and learning how we're doing things. But I think that from a documentary filmmaking standpoint, I kind of stumbled into this. And what I found was, with this film in particular, there's still room to be interpretive, right? Like, I think to Josh's point, one of the things that we did with this film that was kind of unique was, I didn't want to see a true crime documentary where the killer puts their hand on the steering wheel, the gauge goes up, the foot goes on the gravel outside of the door, what we did was, I took a physical theater performance group of some really savvy people from the physical theater world in Seattle. And they portrayed these characters, and we worked in cinema verite, like live directed, no rehearsal. We worked in a theatrical setting with theatrical lighting and projection backgrounds, and built all this stuff out because that's my background. And so then we took all that stuff and really told a story with physical theater, for what people would typically call B-roll, that kind of transcends that. It's not just B-roll. It's like you're looking at something that's a little bit maybe more thoughtful. And so I think with documentary now, the playing field is so large that you can really do what you want. And I think to Josh's point earlier, like, if you don't have to answer to somebody for the money, then you're able to really go and tell the story you want to tell. And we were really lucky to be able to tell the story we wanted to tell here.
And
go ahead, Ryan, or Joshua. That is so important, though, that today creative license is being exercised more than ever before. You don't have a threat looming on your shoulder.
Jimmy, I think the trend that you were speaking to, though, is something that we're all feeling right now. We were talking a little bit about this, or maybe I was someone else I was speaking with today, but there is, I think that, I like you, I'm celebrating the death of the laugh track. You know what I mean? Like, I remember you look back on some of those older sitcoms, and it's like, this feels so artificial. And I think that in this current environment of junk food and junk media, and just a lot of just quick, fast, cheap things that we're putting into our minds and bodies. I think there is a shift that we all feel it. Like you feel it out there every day. You talk to people. Something is indeed changing. It might, be this sort of new Copernican moment or something. But I think that along with that comes really a yearning and a shift and a turn towards the real and how already magical and miraculous and wild and fascinating our reality already is, without needing to necessarily go towards escapism. Again, I'm all for escapism. I can talk to you ad nauseum about any number of sci-fi franchises and whatnot, but there is something that I think is really inspiring in this sort of collective shift that we have seen towards. It's almost like we're opening our eyes again to the world around us, I think, and that feels very tangible and is the exact sort of environment that I think documentaries thrive in.
Yeah. And I think, part of what supports what the three of us are saying here is when you take a film like Quantum Mania, right? Ant-Man, or you take a film like Everything Everywhere All at Once. When you look at both of those films, different, right? No, not really. Heavy science, right? Big science, big physics, big thoughts were put behind those films, and probably would have been above everybody's heads many years ago. Today, people are contemplating and thinking about these subjects, where you can have these very deeply, heavy, interwoven films of scientific theory and facts that play out as part of the screenplay, where the science is the fifth Beatle. And today, audiences get it. I really feel we were talking about earlier. The intelligence of people is so elevated today.
They not only get the science, but they also get the paranormal and the strangeness. I mean, I've spoken with this about some other people. I mean, I don't know, 10 years ago, I'd go to a church group and I wouldn't tell them what I was into because, there was all this stigma around it. And now I'm at church functions and people are coming up to me and asking me about Chris Bledsoe. And it's what happened? And I think that there is sort of a more openness and willingness, of these topics, and people will, the number of people that I've talked to, post 2020 or so, and I start having a conversation with them about UFOs, and I've made no secret about not really being a fan of the extraterrestrial hypothesis myself, and before I can even say that, they're like, "Oh, I think they come from other dimensions," and I'm like, "What? What in the John Keel are you talking about?" The fact that these ideas are becoming so so mainlined into the mainstream, or streamlined into the mainstream, I think is something that none of us have seen before. And it's really startling to see basically these sort of, for lack of a better term, new age paranormal occult ideas becoming just part of everyday conversation. Has been fascinating to see as well.
I miss the old days, though. I miss the old days when we were crazy.
right. Yeah, your inner hipster. Yeah, I know.
We were crazy. We were fighting the good fight.
Hey,
you're preaching Guevara.
You're preaching to the choir. Star Wars is as mainstream as football now. I mean, I'm the same way. I remember there's sort of a certain amount of pride in being the Star Wars nerd that you don't feel.
Yeah, nowadays. I've said it to everyone. You're gonna miss the old days. Right? Be careful what you ask for.
It's true.
And right now, to have UFOs mentioned in the press room at the White House, you know what? That's heresy. I want to keep that to myself, man. That's my world. I want to fight that fight. You know what? The four horsemen are trotting into town.
Well,
they start talking about Sasquatch. If they go there, if we start having Sasquatch hearings on Capitol Hill, that's where I draw the line, man.
We're demanding the list of missing from the National Park Service, along with all of the reported UFO sightings in those areas. I just would like to say that I think that we are headed to the only place you can head, which I know Josh can do, and maybe he'll do it for us, a great Terrence McKenna, but when we talk about the stuff that Terrence was really bringing us, we're headed towards that ultimate novelty. And crazy or not, he was on to something, in my opinion. And we're in that space, you know, always, right? But we're becoming aware of it. And I think that what you're seeing now is, I mean, who on this, whoever's watching this that hasn't gone out in the last week and looked up for those drones?
Yeah, I know.
And,
I know.
And you know, are we getting an op ran on us? Does it get more interesting? You know, and this is like, you know, now this sort of parapolitical, paranormal, sort of crazy, novel, liminal, uncertain place that we're all operating in. This is exactly the age of the trickster, and you can't walk into those spaces with a Euclidean worldview and expect some sort of like, you know, predetermined outcome. Like you're in the valley of the shadow of death, you know, like you're in that space right now. And so the trickster rules apply, which Josh can speak to eloquently. But before he does, please tell us what Terrence McKenna would say about this.
Well, it's a process of complexification through time that is not proceeding at a steady rate. It actually allows for a kind of asymptotic curve. It's a rate of complexification occurring so rapidly that it will become itself the overwhelming phenomena in the world of three-dimensional space and time.
Yeah. The patterns repeat. They show, you know, so here's my answer to that, to both of you. And one, a few months ago, I don't do anything these days. I don't do anything fun. All right. I don't do anything recreational. I ride my Harley. That's what I do. But so I haven't smoked weed in 30 years, 20 years, 30 years. It's been a long time. Or anything else. I just don't do it. I'm a professional. I work and I can't. I want to have fun. I can't have fun. All right. That being said, 4 months ago, I did DMT. For real.
Do tell.
And well, hold on. So, and I've been interviewing, I've been reading McKenna. I've talked to all of McKenna's friends, not all of them, but a bunch of McKenna's friends and people that are around him. And over the last 30 or so years, I mean, I watched and listened to and read everything I could find on him and other stories and research into DMT, right? But the opportunity, plus I was a little scared. The opportunity, it needed to be the right time and the right thing. You know, I've just got too much going on. I just couldn't pull it off. Anyway, so I did 4 months ago. And I came home. Okay, so let's back up. 2 years ago, last year. It was last year. Last year when I got back from Egypt. It wasn't 2 years. I've been in Egypt the last couple of years. So anyway, last year when I got back from Egypt, it was a Friday. Friday, I was in the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid by myself. I was in the Great Pyramid by myself. I was given access, and I had like a half hour alone in the Great Pyramid before other people were. So I went up into the King's Chamber. After that, I went to the airport. I came out like an hour later, 2 hours later. This was at night. I went to the airport and flew back to LA. I get back to LA. Now think about this for a second. So I get back to LA. I arrive home. I go upstairs into my bedroom. I drop my luggage and I say out loud, I live alone, so I can do this. I go, that was in the King's Chamber today. Ah! Okay. I do that. 4 months ago, the feeling of being in the King's Chamber, it's like otherworldly, right? It's crazy, crazy. It was nuts. It was unreal. So 4 months ago, I do DMT and I go to another planet and experience it. It was wonderful. I drive home. I arrive at my house. I go upstairs into my bedroom. I drop my car keys down and I go, I went to another planet. Ah! It was the same feeling,
Mhm.
the same euphoria, the same type of experience of going into the king's chamber by myself and having that moment felt the same to me as going to another dimension and another world on DMT. Same experience,
You went
just as
to a place.
profound, just as profound.
You went to a place.
Yeah,
I did.
I was about to say
I
it
did.
speaks to the objectivity of it. Yeah.
So you know what I did next? I did it again.
Same
I did
place?
it.
You go to the same place?
Same thing. Oh, you mean in the
Yeah.
experience?
Did you go to the same place? Yeah.
No.
Hmm.
No,
Interesting.
that part. No. I went to another world. I just went to
Right.
another city in that
Right.
world.
Okay.
Yeah. A month later, I did it almost to the day, like 30 days later. And that one, the first time that I did it, I stayed cool. And I was there for about 8 minutes. It's insane. By the way, it's not a drug. It's not. It's a key. It's a tool.
Yeah.
There's no ramp up. There's no ramp down. It's just instant on, instant off. And that's a crazy thing to experience. How you can just walk in one door and then turn around and walk back out that door, and you're the same person that you were when you. That's crazy. Yeah, there's no entering of the bloodstream or anything. It's like it's already in you. You know, it's a key.
Your body knows what to do with it. You know.
Yeah, it's a key. It's a key. It's just
Yeah.
it's bizarre, and it's really bizarre. Anyway, but the second time I went Terrence McKenna. Yeah, I went all in. The second
Next time you'll hear Josh impersonating Terrence McKenna.
I don't know about that.
You'll
No
go
one-
to the
nobody wants
dimension.
that.
You go to the dimension where Josh is Terrence McKenna.
Yeah. I would. There is. Let's stay here for a second, if you don't mind. The first time I did it alone with a shaman. Okay, who wasn't. I was the only one. But the second time I was with. I can't say who or what. Or anything like that, but same shaman, but with 2 other people. So there was 3 of us. And so we made this pact before that. We said, okay. And we wore blindfolds, by the way, when we did it. That part was pretty cool. Anyway, we made an agreement to try to meet up with each other. Yeah. And so I could just see Joshua there talking Terrence. Yeah, I could see.
You'll notice that I'm being exceptionally silent. You know,
Yeah.
those things are really personal, and I appreciate you sharing it. But yeah, if you land somewhere and Josh is there speaking like Terrence McKenna, just run.
Yeah.
Very nice. Yeah.
It's crap.
I'm the harbinger of a bad trip. Yeah.
Here's the fascinating takeaway for me with it. You don't hallucinate. You see what you see is real.
Mm-hmm.
It's no different than those guitars in back of me, right? It's as real as that. And though that is not, in case anybody is wondering, that is not green screen. Those are real guitars. And when you launch, when you open that door with DMT, everything that you see is real. It's real.
And back to our discussion about quantum mechanics and those types of things being like lauded in popular culture, you know, as the intelligence that you're working with, starts to permeate society in its own ways, this stuff will drip into the culture, and it'll draw itself to itself, and it'll attract others to itself, because it is kind of an alien intelligence that we're dealing with. And I think that played for me with all this stuff out at Lake Crescent too, and the idea that every town has an Elm Street and every lake may not have a bottom, and there's this case, everywhere you go, and it always leads down the road to, these types of stories and this kind of stuff. There's a cyclic nature to all this stuff. It's like patterns that are expressing themselves. And I think it happens in the paranormal. I think it happens with the guitars behind your back. Like you said, you change one here and there to see if somebody notices, life is operating on those types of meta levels all the time, where things are just kind of shifting around and we're experiencing them differently. And so I think for people who are talking about the psychedelic experience being as real as reality, you can look at how we experience reality and say that it's built on the context of our stories. Because without our stories, we don't have a basis to understand reality. So while we were making The Lady of the Lake, that was very obvious to me. And the film was actually called Death is With Me for a long time, because in the sessions, it got very weird at this one point. And I asked, is there anyone with you? And Amanda says, after a few moments of silence, she just, death. And it scared the crap out of me. It was a very tense moment. And I called the film Death is With Me because of that. But how real was that? I feel like it was real. Everything has this tinge of reality if we choose to believe it, but our stories inform that. So was there an entity that was Hallie Illingworth's, soul that is parked out here at the edge of this lake? Josh, I think you should talk about how you kind of described that as not the ETH, but the DPH, and kind of explain that. And then we could kind of talk about how we undermine that, because in the end, what we came to, and we can drive there, the stories do inform our expectations of reality and what it delivers ultimately. So,
I'd love to. I mean, there was just recently an interview that Dr. Valet gave that's basically said, we have more data points regarding the UFO question, but in terms of learning more hard facts about where they come from and exactly what they are, we really don't seem to be much further along than when he started. And I know that opinions differ, right? But I think that the true spirit of that statement is that until we do have the sort of smoking guns that we all crave, we should keep all sorts of different hypotheses and theories and ideas on the table. And, as much as some people criticize, the ufological establishment for embracing the idea that these have to be extraterrestrials, they are much more open than, quite frankly, a lot of the cryptozoological establishment, or to some degree, maybe if not the parapsychological establishment, then the ghost hunters, who are convinced that every ghost is a dead person, or, the most exotic that they'll tend to lean is perhaps it's, it's a time slip, or it's a stone tape, or, an impression on the land. But they seem to rarely engage with ideas beyond that idea that, ghosts are dead people. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm very sympathetic to that, having had, my most impressive personal experiences have been ghost experiences. But there is sort of a DPH, just as there is an ETH, an extraterrestrial hypothesis in UFO studies. There is a DPH in ghost hunting, which is the dead person hypothesis. And there is, at the same time, similarly, there is a lot of, I wouldn't go so far as to say conflicting evidence, but there's some other evidence that if you look at from a different angle, suggests that something perhaps far stranger is going on with things like ghost sightings and ghost encounters and hauntings. Perhaps this phenomena comes from ourselves. I mean, the consensus on poltergeist activity has certainly shifted that way in the past 60 or 70 years. So that's one possibility, perhaps, but also perhaps this idea that we've been sort of dancing around for a while tonight, and that Ryan just invoked, that we are dealing with some sort of like archetypal, almost narrative-based meta logic, meta structure that we're plugging into when we actually have these different encounters with what we think are just dead people. It might be something far bigger than that and far grander than that. And that's something that I think is really worth exploring further.
You have, you have some of the other, I mean, this spider webs out into 30 or 40 different things really quickly. But
Yes.
one of them, for me, and I think for a lot of people, is the residual stuff that goes on in the physical form of other animate objects, be it houses, dolls, furniture, clothes, a location. You have the spirit of the entity itself, right? But homes, right? And in the film, well, I should say in Port Angeles, actually, in the film too, you have the house, and the house plays a role.
The lodge.
And yeah, the lodge. It plays that structure is another member of the band.
Yeah, for sure. And a lot of activity takes place around that lodge. So then my challenge to myself in understanding some of the context of this was going back to the VHS tapes of Harlan McNutt exposing these kids, to this. Also, one of the interview subjects in the film, a gal named Amber Hassenflug, is now her married name. She is was at one time a camp counselor, and she said that around the campfires, they would introduce this story to the kids, right? And on the side of the lake, and so they're getting it there. They're getting it at school. They're seeing these pictures. They're getting, this story everywhere. And then this lake's in their backyard. So they're out at this lake, and maybe they interact with something, whatever this is. And, whether it's an egregore that they're feeding or whatever, they're sort of bringing this story to bear on it. And I think that we, a la Valet and Wonders in the Sky, tend to meet this thing, whatever it is, with our story. And I think that's where story really has power when it comes to our experience of reality. And we're interacting with the field of pure information, in my opinion, and we're projecting things out onto it, and it's responding. If you look at even where we're at now with artificial intelligence, the large language models, if you say, hey, I'd like for you to talk to me as Stephen King, it'll say, yup, I can do that. Pennywise is down in the old drain. But then if you tell it to talk to you about quantum mechanics in Stephen King's voice, it'll do the exact same thing. What it's doing is it's meeting you where you're at. It's scraping the entirety of the human infrastructure of knowledge, and it's talking to you in a voice that you can understand. But you are authoring that interface, right? And so I think in a lot of ways, the storytelling out in Port Angeles, and it can get really granular. The storytelling out in Port Angeles is informing how people who live there, at the very least, if not people from the area who are hearing the story and going out, and maybe now people who are watching this film and going out, which is secretly my hope. But, these people that are growing up out there and going out and experiencing things are having that story. I think they're projecting it onto it a lot of the times. And so I don't know if Hallie's out there. I couldn't tell you that. But what I can tell you is that people are experiencing things out there, and that this story is being told to impressionable youths. It's being told to adults like myself. It just, randomly, it's being told to folks like yourself who are traveling into the area. And it's a mind virus, essentially, it's a meme that's making its way through the culture. And then when we go out there and maybe get a tinge of the weird, it's right where we're going. So what value does that have? Does that make it real or less real?
Probably there's two great inventions, the greatest inventions in all of humanity, in the history of the world. Okay. Two. One is the story. The story. I think it's the greatest. And then the second greatest invention, and probably the most dangerous invention, the lie. Now think about that for a second. So the story is, it's both fiction and nonfiction. It's the ability to relay news, talk to your family, whatever, right? To communicate the story, the story, the greatest thing ever. We would know about physics or science or the stars or life after death or the significance of a birthday if you didn't have the ability to orate it. Okay. All right. Yeah, learning, teaching, the story. Number two, the greatest weapon. that came off of the story and the ability to communicate is the lie. And so now we have to learn about discernment, how to tell when somebody is stretching something, right? You got that. And then you have empathy that comes off of that, and the other things when you're listening to a story, or concern or sadness or anger, right? But it all starts with the story. So people want that. People want the ability to have the theatrics of the mind, the cinema of the mind, to be told something, whether it's 1 + 1 = 2. We all love that, right? We want to learn, or right, something else, something fantastical. And that's where it comes into play. And that's why, as a director, Ryan, I think that it's so important that you understand the medium and the gift that you are given. You are able to tell a story. It doesn't, it can be fiction, it could be nonfiction, but it's like the greatest invention ever. And it's a gift to be able to do that.
Wow. It's really powerful. No, I think it's a great concept to like look at the story as fundamental, right? No story, no electricity, right? No story, no sliced bread.
Nothing.
Right?
No clothes, man. You're running around wearing animal skins with
no drums. No fire.
You get it. Yeah.
I have just sort of casting an eye to the future, and I want to make sure we talk about what Ryan and I are cooking up next. But
you are a producer, man. He's straight out. He's straight out wearing his colors now.
Just putting the cart on track as best I can. But to your point, I have a new book coming out this spring called Fourth Wall Phantoms, and it tackles this question of the story and how narrative and those sort of expectations play a role within all domains of the paranormal. But one of the things that is really impacted me in sort of looking into this, and how some of our beliefs impact our perception and our interaction with the phenomenon. There are a couple things that I think are worth saying. Number one, I think when Ryan talks about story and I talk about story and talk about projecting and things, we're not saying that people are making these things up. I think that something about storytelling actually entices out paranormal phenomena. George P. Hansen's The Trickster and the Paranormal is among the books that sort of addresses that topic. But number two, you're right. The story is such an important aspect of our lives that we have always built our homes around it, right? The home was always built around the hearth, which was where stories were told. And then with the advent of the radio, built around the radio. And nowadays, where do you hang
dinner table,
Nowadays, where do you hang your TV? You hang your TV right above the fireplace. It's still that same spot of storytelling that is the beating heart of our homes. But stories are also, they're almost like analog telepathy or something. Like the mirrored neurotransmitters that dump into your body with storytelling, the internal physiological reflections that you have when someone is sharing a story with you, especially if they're a good storyteller, are well documented by various research projects. And it really is amazing to see something as intangible as that able to exert such a measurable impact on ourselves. And I think that if story can do that to our physiology, then what can it also do in terms of kindling this branch of our existence in consensus reality to the paranormal, to the supernatural, whatever you want to call it. I think that there's something really important there, a really important lesson in there.
And it brings the imaginal to life. That's what you're talking about, Josh, just to be clear, like you're bringing the imaginal to life. Yeah. And again, when I go back to, we're in the domain of the trickster now. The other thing is, we are in a space where we need stories. We need to wake up. We need to do better as a species if we want to survive. Without the story, Jimmy, as you're saying, it's so clutch to even being able to think our way out of the most basic of problems. And we're dealing with these gigantic and multiple existential meta crises that we're going to have to try to figure our way out of to be effective. Storytelling is really probably the best place to start, and to unpack it. But what a great thing. I'll reference a guy who everybody's probably familiar with, Dr. Mike Masters, who talks about, us being the gray aliens from the future, right? this is so great to me because, and I've told him this, it means there's a future. And I love that. I love that there's a future, right?
It's true, yeah.
And we can tell that story. And to follow my logic that I'm putting forth here, like whether that's real or not is irrelevant because we're telling that story and there's going to be a future. So I think what Josh
you get to wipe your brow. It's like, whew, you mean we make it?
We make it, yeah. Or some of us make it, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, even if it's just a couple of us.
Well, so if you look at Lady of the Lake, this is what it doesn't need to be, again, paranormal. You just need to stick to the facts. Now, if you are sitting around that campfire, that hearth, as Joshua just put it. So you're sitting around and you got your crazy ass uncle, right? And you and the family, you're all sitting around and your crazy uncle goes, okay, let me tell you the story about the lady in the lake. She disappeared after work in 1937. Ghosts were seen along the shores of Lake Crescent for years. And then one night, a couple of fishermen spot a hand sticking out of the water. And they went over, they pulled it up, and it was a body with a skull, faceless, hog-tied, beaten, and they pulled her out of the water. Now, you would go, bullshit, but a good story, Uncle Bob. It's a good story. Yeah.
I was the kid that would have believed it, but
yeah. Well, my point is, it's like, how far was Uncle Bob going to take that before we caught him, in making this up? But it's a good story, Uncle Bob. No, it's true.
What? Why do people like documentaries? Because real life is insane.
Right. That's the story.
You did a great job telling it, by the way. We should have had you come and voice over it.
That voice.
Yeah. I was doing my best Captain Quinn in Jaws.
Yeah.
Big, black, dark eyes.
Doll's eyes.
Yeah. Doll's eyes.
Oh, man.
But yeah, and when people need to understand that you can go and hear something, and especially today, right? You can hear something where it is straight out of Orson Welles or Jules Verne or Edgar Allan Poe, take your pick, but find out that these are true.
Yeah.
Drones over New Jersey. If this isn't 1938 War of the Worlds, I don't know what is, right? And it's New Jersey. It's Grover's Mill of all places, right? So,
and it's so bizarre too, because I was just listening to some astrological report about Jupiter and Saturn coming into alignment, moving out of Capricorn. And I believe it was into, somebody's going to correct me, it was either Aquarius or Pisces. But either way, if you follow the lineage of when this thing happens in reverse, you'll see things that pop up during this time, like Fatima, Crowley in the Pyramid, Summoning Lamb, Bob Lazar popping up. All of these things actually happened during this particular conjunction along the historical line. And I kid you not, within 72 hours of hearing this, there's drones and the government's saying that they don't know. And I'm just like, get out. Like, is this real anymore? But I guess so we are in this sort of like strange, energetic space. But one thing that really sticks out to me about those stories is like the one you just told. That was the one that was told to me, that spooky, gnarly, vicious murder of a woman and the mystery that ensued. And I hope that if we did anything with this movie, everything else that we've talked about here and the layers of complexity that arose after her death and the power of her story impacting people like Amanda, who then go on to investigate themselves further, like me, who goes on to investigate himself further and learn more about the world and my place in it through this story. I hope that is the legacy that we're helping empower for her, as opposed to just being this story about the brutal murder that took place at Lake Crescent. And that was really a huge function of what I was trying to do. At back half of post-production, I just was like, this is not about a murder, right? Like, this is about violence, history, and the supernatural. And what we figured out was kind of that when you throw a rock in the pond, the ripples come back, and it's this never ending cycle. But violence creates trauma, and we deal with the trauma as communities through storytelling. And then the storytelling is projected back out in through our lives onto whatever we're experiencing out here at Lake Crescent. And it's taking a shape of its own from there. So I really do hope that in some way we're adding to that and giving Hallie a renewed purpose and adding her into a long lineage of ladies of the lake. And
you're right about that. And hats off, a lot of respect to Amanda.
Same.
And yeah. And I'll tell you why. It may not be what you think. And Amanda, please take this the right way. You never know who you're walking past. You don't. Amanda looks, well, she is normal, but I'm saying she looks normal. She's a normal person, but what you would never think that if you were dealing with her on a professional level during the day, where her heart lies and where her bliss is.
I could see that, but the moment you start talking to her, her acumen is so deep on this stuff. And
but that's society. That's what I'm saying. Society has got this interest, and the stigma and the taboo that we have laid on it over the years, it's eroding, man. It's eroding. And Amanda's an example of that.
I agree with that. And so part of the function of her character, if you will, in the film was to encourage others to go on this journey. But if you're going to do it and you're going to ghost hunt, don't treat it like the Haunted Mansion at Disney and go hop on and then get off. Go in there and learn about what's happening and then apply yourself to the personal development aspect of this, because where you meet the other, you meet yourself. And through that process, we become maybe, hopefully, a little better than we were the day before we started. And I think that a lot of that's absent. And there's also a lot of absent female representation in this field. And so we were very focused on creating a space where the female representation was forward. It was present. It was, part of the story, part of Amanda's story, part of Hallie's story. There were similarities at times between the two of them that we wanted to talk about and how trauma informs all this stuff. But also at the same time, talking about like the representation of females in the paranormal to show like this is a person. Yeah, she's a woman, but she's also out doing, if I can say the A word, doing badass stuff out here, really pushing herself and going to places that a lot of people, including men, would find unsettling. And challenging herself and growing through the process. So there was so much of that. Like, you're right to say that like the book, you can't judge the book by its cover, maybe, is what you're pointing out. And I would agree wholeheartedly. But, getting to watch her go through that process, I went through it in tandem. So it was really powerful. We had a lot of just strange things that happened that weren't on camera that we haven't really talked about. But, there were just so many times where I was like, wow, Amanda's super brave. And she's doing great. Anybody who doesn't follow Amanda Paulson, she's at Pretty Effin' Spooky. On all of the stuff. I'm the worst social media person, but she's amazing to follow. I follow her because I think she's great. And if you like this stuff, you should check her out because she's evolving. She's not regimented and she's taking a cool journey.
Yeah, she's real cool. I'm gonna argue with you on that point though.
Go ahead.
I feel, you know what? It's our bubble. It's your bubble, and I'm experiencing my bubble. But I have always felt that there's not enough men in this field.
Really?
Yeah. So you go to the Conscious Life Expo where you've got 25,000 people attending that conference. It's big, right? It's cool. It's wonderful. I love it. 25,000, 20,000. I'm going to say 60% women, maybe 70.
Wow. Yeah, that's an optic I don't have. I'm basing
that's attendees. The speaker ratio, it's probably 50-50. But as far as attendees go, man, I'll be sitting in the lounge. I'll be the only guy at a table of 30 women. And
good place to be, right?
Yeah, well, but the point is very intelligent, very courageous. and I've done ghost hunting for TV, and I'm like the only dude on the set, and I've always kind of felt that way. I'm appreciative. Now, it was certainly an old white dude's world, and it is when it comes to UFO research. There's not enough women, but as far as spirituality or the paranormal or mediums or psychics, that's completely female dominated. Completely.
When I see, and I think we should talk about UFOs in a second, but when I and the trajectory that story's on right now, but I see very little of it. But what I do see, and I'm not going to like name anybody, but I see like certain like really high profile men, having these shows, running these shows. And they are the people that are getting the ratings and therefore the ad dollars and therefore, the exposure. And so just my limited optic, right? And regardless of whether,
like I said, that's you're in your bubble. I see
that.
Yeah.
And whatever those numbers are, I feel really proud of like what we did with Hallie's story and Amanda's story. And I still think that level of representation, hopefully women would view it as healthy, for themselves, for their daughters, for their sisters, for whoever's going to watch it, to encourage other women to go out and do these things and follow that journey of self-discovery, because we're not going to have a violent switch from this patriarchal suicide agenda that we're on as a planet overnight into a matriarchy and everything's going to be great. But if we can start to enliven people and bring the imaginal back into focus, maybe we can find some balance and make it through this and be like Mike Masters' Gray Aliens one day.
Yeah. Mike is I have this is just my own observation for sure. But come to the Conscious Life Expo and you'll experience it. You'll see it for yourself. And somebody just commented here that women are more connected to the spiritual inner world, intuition, emotions, and the in aspect of our psyche. And I think that's 100% true. But I have done I've done thousands of shows, thousands. It's crazy, right?
I believe it.
And there, I've had these discussions where I've went, man, we've had 2 men on this month, and the next month rolls around and it's only because I'm not looking at a gender thing at all. I bring on the best of the best. Whatever it is, right? I just bring on the best of the best. And I'm just saying, man, there's some times where I have to struggle. I'm like, man, we got to get some male representation in here.
Well, let's start ghost hunting.
Yeah, for sure.
This little group right here.
Yeah, let's do it, man.
Well, when I'm not looking for drones.
What you guys should do, you're in Florida. Joshua, where are you?
Georgia.
You're in Georgia. Man, you guys are East Coast.
I know.
Yeah, you need to come out here with your cameras and we'll just set them up in my backyard.
Well, Ryan and I might be going lots of places with our cameras in the near future.
Come on. Well, the thing is, James Fox, his new film, right? The Program came out yesterday.
Yeah,
did you see it?
I haven't seen it yet. No, I haven't had time.
All right, I don't want to give it away or anything, but there's a scene in the film where James and I are here, right? We're like,
I remember hearing that you toured him around some of the facilities out there.
Well, we did. So, that's what's great about this area. So James is like sitting here, I'm sitting here, right? And I say something because we were getting ready to go out and do some shooting on location. I said, now it's time to go to work. And James goes, let's go, or something like that. But the point is, that's what you got to come out. There's always just right over here. Well, it happens during the day too. But when the sun goes down, this is a crazy.
I believe it. And maybe producer Josh can tell you why we might.
Yeah. So Ryan and I are planning. We're in pre-production right now on a UFO documentary series, and we plan to examine the topic from some angles that don't get as much coverage in the mainstream. But from a variety of different perspectives that just aren't platformed as often. And we're hoping to roll into production in Q1 of next year. All things going smoothly enough, and we're really excited to be sort of traveling around, getting interviews, and hopefully also getting some stuff on film.
Yeah. Any way I can help, you guys know that.
I appreciate it.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. It sounds great. So it's going to be a series.
Yeah, it's called Beyond Human, and it'll be right now we have, I think, 16 episodes lined out.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so, the goal, I think, just to kind of bounce off of what Josh was talking about, for me was to connect with people like Josh, like yourself, like, again, people that are, working in this all the time, and start the process of evaluating through that lens of different explanations potentially, right? Like, every story can take a left turn if you just look at it, and I think the Lady of the Lake took a left turn, right? Like, and I think that this is kind of the same thing for me with UFOs, and it's a little bit of a deeper knowledge base for me. I've been following the topic for a very long time as a student, but I'm equally as vested in the study of Forteana and just sort of philosophy and that kind of stuff as I am the UFO topic. And so I kind of look at it through a similar lens to Josh. And actually how Josh and I connected was through, he wrote Thieves in the Night. And I wrote him a letter and was like, can we be friends? And then we became friends. But yeah, there's like a great opportunity, I think, now for films like James Fox, The Program, which I'm sure is going to be amazing, to come out and talk about this aspect of it. And then there's still like plenty of room for, people to come and take maybe some non-conventional approaches to the stories. I think we're entering a sort of really cool age for these types of projects. And I'm really excited to be heading into it.
Well, I think what is really kind of important in this moment is to emphasize something that I've been, myself and some colleagues of mine have been trying to convey for a while, is that there's probably a plurality of explanations going on, and they overlap in messy ways. But I think that there are a lot of different things that are on the table that we really should consider. Occult angles, time angles, all sorts of things like that are not necessarily mutually exclusive, but that if we are proceeding into the era that I think we all suspect we are, that people should have a sort of fluency in those alternate explanations as well.
Yeah, I think I don't know this as fact, but I find comfort in theorizing and pondering that it's probably comes down to one thing, one fundamental particle that is connecting all of this shit together. It's like really weird, man. Time travel, life after death, ghosts, spirit,
might that particle
Bigfoot.
be NN dimethyltryptamine?
Yeah, I mean, just something that, I mean, are time travelers, ET, that are us from the future that come in through another dimension and wander across somebody's property. Somebody sees them as a ghost, so they have that ghost experience, right? Somebody else has the ET experience. Somebody else has a time traveler experience. But it's all the same thing, man.
Yeah.
Somebody sees Bigfoot.
Are you living in that space mentally now? Do you, after all of these years and all of this stuff, do you find yourself gravitating towards thinking like that?
It keeps me sane. It keeps me sane.
Yeah.
If you look, it's kind of like the science angle on this, Ryan, where it just something really basic that we don't understand. Maybe we understood at one point in deep history, right? And we let it go, whatever, amnesia. But something very, very basic. It's like the unified theory of everything, the God particle, right? It's that one thing. That one thing that just kind of ties it all together, and it's just like knocking them dominoes down, right? It's that boop, and then suddenly everything is connected.
I think we all agree on this call.
Yeah. And I think I think that's where if we back up and we look at, because I went through the same struggle. If you go back to the 1940s, 1950s, 1960s, when the ETH that Joshua brought up, we all were thinking the same things. Little green dudes, little metal flying saucer, controls, the Jetsons. Yeah. Flying across the universe for a million years and arriving here for some strange reason.
McDonald's.
Could be. All right. So, but it went from that, right? And we're now off of that into wormholes, parallel worlds, the multiverse, time travel, 11 dimensions, and traveling spice, whatever, Dune, and folding space. We're now at that point where something just appears in our reality and disappears out of our reality. Now, are we seeing ET? Are we seeing something else? Are we seeing the multiverse colliding? Is it the Mandela effect? Is it time travel? Or is it just all the same thing? And we experience it differently. So the experience allows us to tell a story from a different perspective on what it is we're seeing.
It's the parable of the
dead grandmother.
It's the parable of the blind man and the elephant, right? It's that old story about what each of them is touching a different part of the elephant, and it's all one elephant, but they all think it's different things. Yeah,
different things. Or it's like Plato's cave.
Yes, it's the shamanic dance under the waterfall.
Okay, Terrence. I
can't do it as good as Josh, but no, really, the simulation theory and Plato's cave and all of that kind of stuff is a very real. The fact that you go from Kenneth Arnold and the boomerang shaped crafts skipping through the air, becoming flying saucers, nuts and bolts, all the way to a modern adaptation of Platonic logic and inside of simulation theory, and you get Nick Bostrom kind of justifying it, and then they're making movies out of the Gnostic demiurge and the Matrix, and kind of putting all this stuff together. We're just telling these same stories over and over again. So to your point, there being that single source, it really makes a lot of sense. So those are the types of topics that we want to explore and their relationship to the UFO phenomenon in this new project.
You guys are on the right track. Ryan, Joshua, thank you so much. Everybody, tomorrow the film releases Lady of the Lake.
On Amazon right now. I got a text while we were talking.
Oh, it's finally made
East Coast, yeah.
I danced over just a couple of small things about the film. Twists and turns, man. Twists and turns. Just go watch it, enjoy it. You guys, great job. And Francis, she's a keeper. All right, I'll talk to you guys. Just behave and be well. Much luck, and then let's talk about some future stuff later on in the week.
Thank you very much, and I love you, Francis. Jimmy's right.
Thank you so much, Jimmy.
Talk to you guys. Have a great night. Thank you so much. Care.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Joshua, Ryan, perfect night. Again, Ryan Grulich, the ability to direct and write and put something like this together is a team. Joshua, amazing work and everything else. The team, it's just shot right. The story is right. It's a perfect film. It is now out on Amazon. Lady of the Lake. All right. I want to remind everybody, tomorrow night, Dr. Dan Biddle is here. We were talking about this earlier tonight. Tomorrow night, we're going to be talking about the Nephilim, giants of the Bible. All of that and much more tomorrow night on Fade to Black. That's all I've got for now. Go back, Lee Tappy. Fade to Black is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee Newman, and Michelle Freed. Special thanks to Bill, John, Dex, Jessica, Dennis, and Kevin. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music by Doug Aldrich. Intro, Space Boy. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network. This broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2024 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Go back, Lee Tappy.